morning, everyone. Welcome to Abide by the Law Legal Forum, Drug Traps, organized by the Community Relations Committee of the Law Society of Hong Kong. I'm Charmaine Ng, member of the Subcommittee of Abide by the Law Education.
Good morning, everyone. I'm William Tong, Vice Chairman of the Subcommittee on Abide by the Law Education. It's our pleasure to be your MCs today.
William, did you know that, unfortunately, the number of reported student drug abusers last year increased by 45%? The Law Society has set the theme of today's forum as drug traps in order to look into the social trends, related news, cases, and controversies about dangerous drugs. This topic is not only very important, but relevant to today's youngsters.
To make today's event even more fruitful, we have divided this legal forum into two sections. Firstly, there will be a keynote sharing sections on drug abuse and illicit trafficking. Secondly, there will be a panel discussions on drug-related crimes and current trends. Distinguished speakers from various sectors and professions will be sharing with us their profound knowledge and insights and the importance of being a law-abiding citizens.
To kick off today's legal forum, we would like to invite Mr. C.M. Chan, President of the Law Society of Hong Kong, to say a few words.
CM, please.
Commissioner Seal, Stephen Hong, Professor Chang, Mr. Stephen Wong, Mr. Felix Ng, Mr. Anthony Low, Ms. Charlene Chan, teachers, students, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. On behalf of the Law Society of Hong Kong, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this forum. I would also like to extend my special thanks to Mr. Raymond Seal, Commissioner of Police, for gracing us with his presence and speaking to us, and of course the Narcotics Division of the Security Bureau of the Hong Kong government for supporting this forum. In 2020, the Law Society started organizing the annual event Abide by the Law Legal Forum to cultivate law-abiding spirit and to raise legal awareness among youngsters. As a responsible citizen, there are many ways to be law-abiding, and say no to drugs is one of the good ways to put this norm into practice. According to the latest figures from the law enforcement agencies, among the young arrestees of drug offenses aged under 21 in the first half of 2022, 64% of them were arrested for serious drugs offenses, of which the proportion is higher than that of arrestees of drug offenses aged above 21 by 15%, 1-5. Among the young arrestees aged under 21 who were prosecuted for drug trafficking during the same period, nearly 80% were convicted, very high conviction rate. It is very concerning to see that the rising figures of youngsters being arrested for drug offenses in the first half of this year. As a legal professional, I must remind our young people that taking part in drug offenses, especially drug trafficking, has very serious legal consequences. In a recent Court of Appeal judgment, the judge held that the court, I'm quoting, the court would give young offenders a chance to rehabilitate. However, this does not mean that the court focuses only on the youth factor. If, as a matter of public interest, the seriousness of the offense and the circumstances of the case call for a heavy or deterrent sentence, the offender's young age and personal background would count very little. End of quote. Meaning what? This wholly dispels the myth that young offenders of drug-related crimes can afford the legal liabilities. So I sincerely urge young people to abide by the law lest they will regret it for a lifetime. Against this background, the Subcommittee on Abide by the Law Education of the Law Society organizes the Legal Forum themed Drug Traps this year to look into social trends, related laws, cases, and controversies about dangerous drugs. Legal consequences aside, drug abuse and drug trafficking have a serious impact on youngsters' physical and mental well-being. We hope that by attending today's Legal Forum, you can grasp a better understanding of the harms of drugs and the legal awareness of this compelling subject. Let's hold dear to the positive values in life, stand firm to combat drug problems, and be law-abiding citizens. Last but not least, I would like to express my sincere thanks to all distinguished speakers for taking time out of your busy schedules. Our audience here today would definitely benefit from the thoughtful insights you will be sharing. So thank you very much for everyone here for honoring us with your presence.
Thank you, President. Please be seated.
Now, may we invite Mr. Raymond Siu, Commissioner of the Police Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Police Force, to say a few words.
President of the Law Society of Hong Kong, Mr. Chapman Chan, distinguished guests, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. My thanks go to the Law Society of Hong Kong for inviting me to address this Abide by the Law Legal Forum. It is my pleasure to speak to you all this morning. The theme of today's forum is drug traps. As you know, combating illicit drugs has always been a top priority on the Hong Kong Police Force agenda, and it has also been one of the Commissioner's top operational priorities over the years. Dangerous drugs are definitely traps that no one should have fallen into, especially the young ones like all of you, future leaders of our society. Drug problems presents a serious threat to the whole community, and that is not confined to drug abusers. First, illicit drug abuse severely undermines your health. Never try taking drugs in the first place because it will cause irreversible effects in your body. Second, quite a number of social problems come alongside drug abuse which poses risk to our society's law and order, be it street-level delinquency or organized crime. It is not uncommon that those arrested for robberies or petty theft are drug addicts who cannot but break the law in order to sustain their drug needs, not to mention those who drive under influence of drugs. Combating drug activities, therefore, open an avenue for reducing other crimes and make Hong Kong a safer city. Third, drug abuse harms not only abusers, but also their entire families. Spouses, children, and parents will be paying the heavy price of drug addiction, which is often self-altering. Like family members of drug addicts are often subject to domestic violence and sexual abuse or victimized by neglect. Ramification of drug traps is never limited to just individuals. Lastly, both possession or trafficking of drugs are very serious offenses with severe sanction up to life imprisonment. We should never think that young age is a strong mitigation factor. On the contrary, the court handed down that age carries very little weight on the sentencing for drug-related cases. If you are convicted of trafficking cocaine for a weight similar to a can of soft drink, according to the sentencing guidelines, you should be prepared to have your life behind bars for at least 12 years. On top of that, you will have a criminal conviction record, which will surely be a stumbling block for studying abroad or practice as a doctor, lawyer, or other professions. In recent few years, it has been alarming to see the significant increase in the number of arrests of young people for serious drug offenses. In the first 8 months of this year, 320 young persons were apprehended for drug-related offenses. Similar to most of you, a number of them are well educated, either studying abroad or at local universities, but they unfortunately lack the determination to resist the drug temptation and had their future ruined. I'm always saddened to see and to hear these stories, and that is the reason why the police force has stepped up our efforts to curb youth-related drug offenses and work tirelessly to track down the drug syndicates behind scenes. We also continue to promote robust drug control by monitoring trends in the supply of drugs and work closely with the stakeholders to interdict illicit drug flow into Hong Kong. Most importantly, we are committed to walking into the community and bringing anti-drug messages to the public. Last year, the Narcotics Bureau of the Hong Kong Police Force organized a 1-month-long anti-drugs publicity campaign with a series of innovative means, such as adopting virtual reality for students to experience the harmful effects of dangerous drugs, and collaborating with university to develop simulated drug smell for students, teachers, and parents to identify drug signs. We have also launched a year-long program named Leadership Institute on Narcotics, LION, to equip secondary and university students to help disseminate anti-drug messages to the community, in particular the young people. The second-year LION program is now recruiting new members, and I cordially welcome all of you to join and fight against drugs together. Also, anti-drug publicity campaign for this year has started, and I hope that you will have a chance to visit our anti-drug promotion truck in the city starting from tomorrow. We must continue to build a consensus of zero drug tolerance in Hong Kong. The police force cannot carry out this resolution alone without your support. May I now invite you all to join me to say no to drugs and bring this message to all the people around you. Later, Chief Inspector Anthony from the Narcotics Bureau will have a discussion with other speakers to address the traps posed by drug abuse and trafficking. He is going to share an interview with a 15-year-old girl whose life was completely changed after she was given a 17.5 years of imprisonment for trafficking 20 kilograms of drugs. In fact, I visited this girl together with her mom recently. I asked her whether she has any advice to give to other youths. And she said to me in Chinese, 要帶眼識人，因為一開始同呢啲人接觸，你係好難抽離佢哋。Beware, in English, okay, beware of those who come across you. And once you fall into the trap, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for you to get away from them. The girl, in fact, now very much treasures the time with her mother. 20 minutes visit twice a week, and she has to wait for another 8 to 10 years before she can be discharged. You will later see her on one of our video clips. Now, finally, I hope all of you will have a very fruitful discussion and gain some insight to help you and those around you stay away from the drug traps. Thank you once again, and let's work together and help the young people to cast off drug traps. And by the way, today is one of our speakers, Anthony, one of my colleagues' birthday today. And she will meet you, and he will meet you all today. Okay. Okay. Be kind to him. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Seal. May we now invite Professor Zheng Yuhua to give his keynote sharing. Professor Zheng, please.
Hello, good morning. I thought there would be a big screen, but you have to have very good eyes in order to look at the content of the two televisions. But most of the slides are quite big in the words, so I don't think you have any problem seeing it. Well, Mr. CM Chen, President of the Law Society of Hong Kong, and the Police Commissioner, Mr. Seal, and all the very charming Law Society staff who organizes this very wonderful session. And I myself, I'm teaching at Xi'an University right now, but I had spent 30 years teaching at Chinese University, the sociology department, before I sort of retired or changed jobs from CU HK to Xi'an University. And I had been a hostel warden for 20 years, and one of the students in my hostel back in Chinese University, he actually is here, bringing his students here. So there is a sort of a legacy or how to say heritage of the CU spirit, and also the kind of serve the community spirit here. Now, I'm trained in sociology, which means looking at the society, not just people, but society, groups, social relationships, and all that, which may influence individual behavior in society. So today, I'd like to use a somewhat sociological perspective to give you ideas what some of the factors at the more societal level or social change that has happened in Hong Kong in the past 3 or 4 decades that may influence young people like yourself, use of engagement in risk behavior, including drug use behavior, right? So let me check out how do I get to the second. Okay. All right. So the title of my topic actually is Social Change and Drug Abuse. I try to look at how young people like yourself, how a drug subculture may have developed among you, among drug users in the past 2 or 3 decades in the context of the social change in Hong Kong. Besides, this is also my introduction. My another hat, which is I chair the subcommittee on treatment and rehabilitation of the Action Committee Against Narcotics, the ACAN, one of the ACAN subcommittees. I've been also chairing it for 2 years. All right. So to start with, let me take you through a table, which may be too small for you to see. But I have highlighted some of the figures here, which I can just tell you what the content is. Now, this is a table which I collated from data from the Central Registry of Drug Abuse, CRDA. All right, this registry creates information from drug abusers, the information submitted by treatment programs, hospitals, clinics, social service agencies, schools, etc. And the information here is about those aged under 21 who have used drugs in the past, in that selected years in the table, all right? And I have listed several commonly used drugs here. The first one is heroin, which actually is not commonly used among young people today. And then psychotropic drugs, or sometimes we call it psychoactive drugs from the academic view. So psychoactive drugs include here ketamine, MDMA, which is ecstasy or 冰頭啦, methamphetamine, which we call ice啦, and then cannabis, which is so disturbing today, and cocaine and cough medicine, which has not been, which has faded in its popularity among young people. Now, what you see is on the first row, heroin. In 1980 or 94, 97% of the reported individuals reported to CRDA, all right, and 90-something% of those under 21 had used heroin. So heroin had been a very dominant drug, both among young people and as well as adults, of course, right? But this situation changed. When it came to mid-1990s, like 1998, only 58% of the abusers under age 21 had abused heroin. And then this percentage continued to drop in the 20s, in the 2000s, until in the past 5 years, it's only a handful of 1 or 3 or 5% of heroin users among those aged under 21. So that has been in its significance. Now, the psychoactive drugs are very different. Ketamine arrived on the Hong Kong drug scene back in the 2000s. 36% of young people had used it. And then that percentage increased to 70% in the next 2 years. And then the height of the percentage was 2008, which was 65%. So ketamine has dominated the young people's drug scene in Hong Kong for say beginning from the 2000s until 2014 or 2015. Okay, it had a 15 years of dominance. Ketamine, but ketamine, nowhere in the world was interested in ketamine except Hong Kong in those days in the 2000s. So actually, in Hong Kong, when this suddenly became very popular, even the medical people they don't know why. I mean that actually is just a drug for operation of horses or animals, not for human beings. Right? But then it got very popular among young people, and then everyone is wondering what the drug was, and then what are the methods to prevent it and to cure it, and so on. So that had its own dominance period until the MDMA, the 冰頭, the ecstasy, began to be popular in the year 2000 and for several years. And then when the police cracked down on illegal rave parties and so on and discos, it sort of dropped in popularity. Methamphetamine, ice became very popular when ketamine was on the decline. So that was the mid-2000s when ketamine began to suffer a decline. Then ice took over its place to become a dominant drug, but not for too many years, because in the last 5 years we know that cannabis had risen to become the most popular drugs among young people. So these are the small number. The numbers that I like to share with you about young people's use of drugs in the past 2 or 3 decades. The idea is heroin had become unpopular, but then series of psychoactive drugs came to the scene and became dominant, and then weaned, and then took over by other drugs. So it's always a succession of new drugs coming in the scene. All right, and then if you would take a look at the percentage, these are the percentage of drug abusers reported to CRDA aged below under 21 among the total population of drug abusers. That's the percentage. The percentage actually in the 1990s or before was very small. It seldom got up to 10%. But then from 2000 onwards, the percentage of those under 21 over the total number of drug addicts, including adults and so on, the percentage rose to 24% in 2008 and so on. Now, currently, beginning the mid-2000s, it had begun to drop, though. It had begun to drop in terms of drug users reported to CRDA. And so that's the brief situation that I'd like to talk to you. But the question that I have posed for you is, why was there an increase of drug use among young people in the mid 1990s? All right, and that I like to share with you the social change and as an explanation. Or that was my explanation was explained in one of the publications I had back in the past. Now, economic factor. Now, Hong Kong has benefited from the inflow of large number of migrants from the mainland, cheap labor and capital and technical know-how from entrepreneurs coming from mainland China and so on. So Hong Kong was a very important export processing zone, facilitating the flourish of small and medium-sized industrial enterprises. And back in the 1970s, when I was a young man, economic takeoff began, and Hong Kong was one of the 4 dragons. The other 3 dragons were Singapore, Taiwan, and South Korea. Now, at that time, actually, we experienced an increase of educational opportunities, and the second university was even opened in 1963. Now, upward mobility was possible. There was an increase in upward social mobility, and there was an expansion of middle class here at that time. So for young people, competition in the entrance of university and job market have of course had made it possible for young people to experience upward mobility. And upward mobility in a society is a protective factor against crime and deviance in young people, including drug abuse. All right. So, but there was a sharp turn since the 1980s when mainland China opened its economy, and then lots of factories in Hong Kong began to move northward, and then the industrial-based economy in Hong Kong was transformed into one that was finance-based and full of speculations in stock and property markets and so on. And the Gini coefficient began to rise. It was as serious as 0.54 in 2011, 2016. It had dropped a little bit recently. For young people, competition in the entrance of university and in job market have been extremely tough nowadays. And upward mobility is now more limited than before. And what we call the stake of conformity for young people have decreased. And that's why you have more and more young people engaged in crime and deviance and including drug use behavior. Now, what about the culture? The traditional Chinese culture is still dominant in the 1960s and 70s. When I was a kid growing up, we had to obey our parents, obey our teachers, and so on, and don't ask questions, just do it, right? Now, that was no longer the situation. But in the past, that was a big informal control of the parents, teachers, and so on. But nowadays, family and school, they are not really able to be a socialization agency or social control agency because children growing up now, they are increasingly materialistic and individualistic, and the traditional informal control functions of the family and the school have weakened. Okay, that is quite easy to understand. And then the third factor is the risk society factor, which says that in a society nowadays, individuals began to be dissociated from the traditional authorities, conventional authorities. So we don't depend on the conventional authorities, schools, families, and so on, anymore in terms of calculation of risk and also the making the decision as to what should I do this or do that. So and in terms of drug use, they would calculate the risk of drug use themselves and then decide that if the benefits outweigh the cost, then they would do it. Now that we called by sociologists, we call it normalization of recreational drug use. 消閒性藥物使用嘅正常化. Now that involves a higher prevalence of drug use among young people, higher level of acceptance of recreational drug use, and the popularity of not heroin but psychoactive drugs. So these are the three characteristics of a trend of normalization of drug use, which is can be seen in overseas and also in some of them in Hong Kong. We've done a study of the Hong Kong situation and concluded that normalization did take place in Hong Kong, but then much more limited to marginal youth than regular youth. All right. Now there is what we call the neutralization process in this process of development. And it concerns risk perception and management, how young people perceive the risk of drug use and how they manage their drug use in the context of their calculation or perception of risk. All right. Now, number one, there is a wrong perception of hard drugs and soft drugs. Hard drugs, heroin, 哇呢啲係好勁嘅嚇。Hard drugs, soft drugs, ketamine, psychoactive drugs, they are much less. As long as they stay away from heroin, then they are safe, because soft drugs are safe. That's what their perception is. That's certainly a wrong perception, all right? And then heroin is considered old-fashioned by young people today. It's not trendy, all right? Ketamine in the 2000s was very trendy. And drug use was considered as a bad habit rather than a drug addiction. Now, this is very important. They think that taking some ketamine every day, or especially when they are with their friends and so on. Now, that's a bad habit, but which is not good. Okay, but everyone has bad habits. Even teachers have bad habits, right? Your parents have bad habits. So taking some ketamine is no big deal, right? So now that perception of bad habit undermines their awareness of the drug, of the risk of getting addicted. So they think they're safe, and then, up to a point they get addicted, and there's no return. And they also think that they can control use of it. So the chance of getting addicted is not high. You are so young and so physically fit, and you cannot imagine that you, and also your friends are using it, right? Most of you, or all of your group members are okay without being addicted or suffer too many health consequences of drug use. So it's no big deal, right? So they continue to use it. Now, if unfortunately they get addicted, it's sort of God's will, no escape, 整定啦. All right. Now this is true because in one of our studies, of ketamine users, they told us all this information, what they are thinking in their mind, and this is unbelievable because they think that they won't get addicted, but then when they get addicted, 係天意, it's fate. All right. So and for cannabis that we are so concerned today, there are some additional neutralizations involved. All right, the cannabis has been legalized or decriminalized in a large number of countries in the West, right? So cannabis, it means that cannabis is not harmful. So if other countries can accept it, decriminalize it, or even legalize it, then why should we not do it in Hong Kong? All right, that is the argument that's being put forth in pushing for the decriminalization of cannabis use. But the reality is cannabis is a drug. You check the medical books, medical library, medical literature. It's medically proven to be harmful to the body and the brain, addictive. And it's also a gateway drug to multiple drug use, right? You use cannabis, it opens the door for you to try other drugs at the same time, multiple drug use. So here in Hong Kong now, we should hold the fort in primary prevention rather than let cannabis use spread and become a disaster like the case in many countries. So our difference is here now in Hong Kong, we have not had yet, we don't have a serious problem of cannabis use among young people or adults. But in the West, like the US or Canada, they already had a big problem with cannabis. So decriminalizing it is just a way to cope with this too heavy kind of criminal justice system burden that they want to at least ease it a little bit. So we're on two different situations. Don't let Hong Kong become as serious as the U.S. or Canada in cannabis abuse, and then legalize it. Right? We don't do that. Now we hold the fort and do primary prevention. That's very important. All right. So the result of neutralization is you underestimate the risk and overestimate the ability in risk management of yourself. So if addiction problem occurs, resort to faith and continue to use drugs. Now that's a very, very, very poor judgment, right? The judgment at the beginning, neutralization would lead you to a wrong path, and then you continue on the wrong path because you've already been on that path. And so young people, some of you are chasing the trendy drug, ketamine dominance from 2000 to 2015. And then beyond ketamine, ICE took over 2015 and 2018, and then cannabis since 2018. That's the current situation. And what's the next stop, right? So to summarize, I have introduced to you economic factors, cultural factors, risk society factor as more macro societal factors. And then this neutralization subculture has continued, and that was due to the normalization of recreational drug use, and it reinforces normalization, and normalization reinforces the neutralization drug subculture among young people today. So that's my conclusion of my talk here. I hope that it gives you some ideas which you may not have thought of in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Cheung. Please be seated. May I now invite our past president, Mr. Stephen Hone, to give his keynote sharing. Mr. Hone, please.
Commissioner, presidents, we have two presidents here. Ladies and gentlemen, let me figure out how my mouse works first. I'm sorry. Okay. I think I wish to start with the most important basic principle in criminal law. It applies to all criminal law. First of all, burden of proof. In Hong Kong, when you're arrested, you don't have to explain anything because the burden is not on the defendant to prove his innocence. Okay? In theory, you can keep your mouth shut all the way to trial. When I say burden of proof rested on the prosecution, is that the prosecution has to prove each and every elements of the offense or to disprove a defense assertion. The standard is beyond reasonable doubt. In layman's term, simply say, the jury or the court has to be sure that the defendant committed the offense. Now, I wish to ask one question. I hope you're not asleep. If the judge tells the jury, you have to be 100% sure of the guilt of the defendant, is there anything wrong with this statement? Maybe just raise your hand. If you think there's nothing wrong with this statement, then please raise your hand. I just want to see the majority of you, how you think. Great, I have one respondent. Okay, I assume that the rest believe that there's something wrong, isn't it? Would someone brave enough to tell me what you think? Where's the wrong? No? Okay. It's wrong. Because the Court of Appeal said it's not right to give a percentage. Okay? It's better to tell the jury that if you have any doubt, you should acquit. That's how it works. Okay? The court is not looking to convict, especially in a jury trial. Okay? The jury should be told that if you have any doubt of whether the defendant did commit the offense, then you should quit him. Balance of probability. Layman's term, more likely than not. As I said, the burden of proof rested on the prosecution. But in certain circumstances, for example, if the defendant said, oh, I hit him because I was suffering from mental illness, then the burden shifts to the defendant to prove that he was suffering from some form of mental illness at the time of the offense. But the defendant need not prove beyond reasonable doubt. Okay? As long as his version or his assertion is credible, then it should be accepted. I already touched on the right to remain silent, so I'm not going to say anything more. Please bear in mind that these principles, okay, are the foundation of our criminal justice system in Hong Kong. Okay. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk about, oh, by the way, I just mentioned that in some cases, defendant could raise a defense that he was suffering from some form of mental illness. There is a legal presumption of sanity. Prosecution need not prove that you are sane. Okay, it's the defendant's to. I mean, if the defendant wish to raise the defense of insanity or diminished responsibility, or simply under some form of psychiatric illness, the burden shifts to the defendant because there's a legal presumption, right, that you are sane. Now, I know I'm supposed to talk about drugs. But I wish to be a party pooper. Okay. Let's talk about the consequence. I'm not talking about whether you'll be sentenced to jail or not. Talk about the consequence. In Hong Kong, after 1984, the court no longer has a discretion to order a no conviction not to be recorded. The court doesn't have that power anymore. Okay. So how are you going to get a criminal conviction? A criminal record? First of all, it starts with a lawful arrest of any criminal offenses. And then a mugshot, that is your photograph taken inside a police station, fingerprinted. And you're brought to court to face a charge and subsequent a conviction by the court. As I said a few minutes ago, once you are convicted, even if the court sympathizes with your act, and the judge said, I truly sympathize with you, you can leave the court. I'm not going to punish you. You will still have a criminal record. Okay. So anything in addition, a fine, probation, sent to jail, that goes without saying that you will have a criminal record. In 1984-85, when we took away the judge's discretion to not to record a conviction, At the same time, we have this Rehabilitation of Offenders Ordinance, okay, which simply said, if a person was convicted, the court did not sentence the defendant to a term of imprisonment of more than 3 months, did not order a fine of more than $10,000 per charge, and if the defendant keep himself clean for the next 3 years, in the 4th year, the record, to a certain extent, will be expunged. It still sounds, it's acceptable, okay? Because the law gives you a chance to turn a new leaf in the 4th year. But if you read in detail of this ordinance, there are exceptions. For one thing, occupations that need a license, okay, you have to disclose your criminal record, regardless how old that record is. For example, if you want to practice as a solicitor in Hong Kong, by the time you finish law school, you should be at least, 23? But you may have committed an offense when you're in the secondary school, 15, 16, 17. You still have to disclose that criminal record to the Law Society. I understand that the same applies to insurance agents. But in short, any occupation that requires a license, this Rehabilitation of Offender Ordinance doesn't protect you. The most common inquiry that I was asked to answer is security guards. Okay. Certificate of no conviction. That's something to be provided to a foreign consulate in order to apply for immigration, in some circumstances to study abroad. Okay. There was a challenge sometime in the 80s against the Commissioner of Police, saying that why is there still a record on my certificate of no conviction, which was more than 4 years ago. Okay. The Court of Appeal said it clearly, because this piece of document, the certificate, it's for use. How should I say it? It will be given to a foreign country. Hong Kong is not at liberty to hide the fact that the person had a criminal record in the past. So Hong Kong is under no duty, okay, to hide such a unfortunate record from foreign countries. So in short, you will never get a clean certificate of no conviction. Now, the ordinance, Dangerous Drugs Ordinance, Chapter 134 of the Laws of Hong Kong. I just highlighted a few definitions. First of all, under the interpretation section, dangerous drugs means any of the drugs or substance specified in Part 1 of the first schedule. I haven't printed out the first schedule because it's pages. Apart from names, okay, any composition or compound of an illicit drugs, you can find it in the schedule. So it's very, very wide. The next thing is trafficking. Take a look at the wordings. Can you tell me there's any act that fall outside the definition? Importing, exporting, dealing with, possession for the purpose of trafficking. when you bring in drugs, for example, a small amount of cannabis from across the border for your own consumption, and if you are found with the drugs when you're crossing the border, you will be charged with trafficking. You attempt to bring some drugs to for the holidays abroad, and the drugs were found when you're checking in at the airport. That will be also trafficking, because that will be exporting. A friend give you a joint to smoke cannabis. The giver is also trafficking. The friend said, let's share a dime bag, cannabis. And you said, good, okay, you go ahead and buy it. I'll give you the money back. Unfortunately, that's also trafficking. Now, you are lucky that being charged with trafficking and the prosecution accept your lesser plea of possession. Whether you need to be sent to jail, it's not my concern. But my concern is you will have a criminal record upon conviction. If you are convicted on trafficking, just like the commissioner said, you'll be facing a substantial period of incarceration. Oh, by the way, dealing in and dealing with, apart from sharing, it also refers to safekeeping. So trafficking is not the general sense that the defendant was caught selling the drugs to another person. That's not it. Okay? Trafficking is much, much wider in definition. Okay, dangerous drugs. Section 2. Subsection 2, a person be deemed to be in possession of drugs, pipes, and something. Remember a few minutes I said, the burden of proof is on the prosecution. Remember I told you that you don't need to explain anything. But unfortunately, when we're dealing with drug offenses, okay, the law set out a number of deeming provisions. This is one of them. Section 2, bracket 3 is very important because it said whether the drug was insufficient to be measured or used, you can still be charged. It's referring to cases where the party already consumed the drugs. At one time, the cannabis was in a plastic bag, and then now there's nothing in the plastic bag. But there are traces of the cannabis found, you can still be charged. Trafficking in a dangerous drug. Definition I already explained to you. I just want to raise an example. The way this section is worded, I can tell you mistaken belief of a type of drugs. You were given a bag of heroin, but you thought those are ice. That's not a defense. Mistaken belief of a type of illicit drugs is not a defense. I just want to say a few words in bracket 3A on indictment. See the words on indictment? It simply means that the charge could be tried in the high court before the jury. Summary of conviction means that the charge will be tried by a single judge, either not in the district court, but in the magistrate court. I'm running out of time. Now, the reason why I picked section 4, capital A, look at the heading, trafficking in purported dangerous drugs. This section covers that the drugs in effect are not illicit drugs, but everyone believe that they are trafficking in illicit drugs, you still can be caught. I'll leave it to you to look at the provision. I just want to highlight these things. Take a look at bracket 1A, the wording. Traffic in any substance represented or held out by him, that is the defendant, to be a dangerous drug, but which is not in fact a dangerous drug. So if you're lying, if you want to sell something that is not illicit drugs to a friend in order to get some money from him, and you tell him that, oh, these are good stuff, unfortunately, you might be caught under Section 4, capital A. Possession. All you need to know is the definition for possession. Prosecution needs to prove knowledge, that you know that those substances are illicit drugs, and control. Possession doesn't mean that simply the drug has to be found on you. That's not it. Okay? As long as you have control, you have keys to the house, you have keys to a box, keys to the car, where drugs were found inside the car, that already satisfies part of the definition. Knowledge is the other one. But if a friend told you that I have heroin with me, and stop there, you have knowledge that I have heroin on me, but that is not sufficient to convict you because you do not have control. But if the two of you agrees to share the drugs, it's only one bag. Logic dictates that only one person can carry the bag. The other guy who doesn't have the bag on him can't get away with it. Okay. Just, you don't need to come down. I know I'm running late. I just want to bring this section 9, cultivation of cannabis plants. I'm telling you, I had a case in the district court. It will be sentenced in November. Okay, cultivation of cannabis plant. It's very easy. It's very common. A friend gives you some seeds. It looks like an ordinary plant, but it happens to be a cannabis plant. I strongly advise you to dispose of the seeds. Don't even try to, grow it. One single plant or even seeds will be sufficient to lead to a conviction. Please, when we say stay away from drugs, actually stay away from cannabis plants also. Okay, possession of pipes, equipment, nothing's about. Presumption. Remember I said the law presumes certain facts. Section 47 said presumption of possession, knowledge of dangerous drugs. So if you have physically found to be in possession of illicit substance, the law presumes that you know that those are illicit substance. Now, I specifically use the word illicit substance. The law doesn't need to prove that you knew they are heroin, cocaine, ice, or anything. As long as you knew they are illicit substance, that's sufficient. Now, although these are presumptions, the Court of Appeal, because when we have the Bill of Rights Ordinance, actually ruled that it's no longer a legal presumption. That is, you don't have to prove on a balance of probability that you don't know those are drugs, the drugs are not yours. But you are obliged to show some evidence. That is, likelihood, you need to go into the witness box to explain. So it's no longer the case that you can keep your mouth shut when you're dealing with drugs. In theory, no one can force you to explain. But the court will look at it in a very different way. Because if you didn't know that those are drugs, why didn't you say so? Albeit you have the right to remain silent. It sounds very contradictory, but this is how it works for drug cases. Now I'm finished. Okay. I must apologize that I have overrun. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hong.
Hello, everyone. Did you enjoy the presentations from Professor Chung and Mr. Stephen Hong? Yeah? Did you take notes? Yeah, because there is going to be an exciting part. It's going to be a pop quiz with special prizes. So thank you again, Professor Chung and Stephen, for the very interesting and insightful sharing with us. Shall we give them a big round of applause again?
Thank you very much.
They have set the scene for us on today's topic from the sociology perspective and also the legal perspective. So I'm very honored and privileged to be the moderator of this session. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. So let's get into it. Perhaps the first question to Professor Chung. So in your presentation, you talked about like the social change, cultural issues, risk society issues leading to the normalization and neutralization on the use of drugs by the young people. And this is more about like the first attempt and how they get into drugs and get trapped with drugs. And in your experience, in your researches, have you come across any examples about how they get out of drugs? I think in Commissioner Seal's speech, he shared with us about an interview with a young girl that is very easy to get into it, but very difficult to get out of it. So in your researches or any examples about how to quit and getting out of drugs?
Okay, thank you. Yes, actually, I've been conducting research in the drug area for 20 odd years and published books and also articles. And most of my research actually focused on the psychosocial factors which influence rehabilitation of drug abusers, especially in the past 15 years. I've been studying young people's rehabilitation from drug addiction, because rehab from psychoactive drugs is quite different from the rehab from heroin or narcotics drugs. So narcotics drugs, you have you go, one of the modules is you go to the methadone treatment program, right, for maintenance especially. But then for psychoactive drugs is a totally different thing. You don't, it's just not very useful for if you go to methadone clinics. And a lot of these have to do with counseling and so on. And in Hong Kong, we have a very established system of rehabilitation, the different kinds of, I mean, some are residential, some are not residential, some are temporary, some are longer term, that sort of thing. So, but then for young drug abusers, my study tell me that, number one, you have to help the rehabilitating client, the addict, to increase their ability to resist drugs. That we call self-efficacy in resisting drug use, and that's not simple. That's not easy, because one of my addicts that I study, you know, he was on heroin, and then he's tried 10 times, 12 times, kind of treatment, but then still wasn't successful, because whenever he came across on a bus or walking by Kowloon City. Kowloon Sengzai, where where his friends were and so on, and then you know, just the fact of passing by on a bus, passing by Kowloon Sengzai, the queue was there, and then he began to crave for heroin, even though he had just already finished the treatment and rehab program. So this psychological addiction is very difficult to get rid of, and then so to train them to develop this self-advocacy. And the other thing is family factor, very important. Help him to, the family support is always the most important element in helping the drug using youth to get rid of drugs. Family support. And then another thing is that I'd like to mention here is that for young addicts, it's different from adult addicts. They've been adult addicts. They have been on the drug for so long that they were not looking for a good path to successful career anymore. But for young addicts, like at the 20s, 30s, they still have the future. So self-satisfaction in terms of how they look at their life after recovery, that's very important. That's very important. So all these 生涯规划, all these life planning, vocational planning program become very important after they finish the drug treatment program. So these are some of the elements which are very important in drug recovery.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing. I think this is very insightful, right? But I think the best advice is still to get to know the law, to abide by the law, and not to get into any drugs, so you don't have to face the difficulty, as to how to get out of it. And thank you, Professor, for sharing. And the next question for Stephen is more a hot topic. I think on its own is a debate topic, perhaps for the whole legal forum, but I'm going to keep it like a short question for Stephen.
Do I have to answer?
Depends. So it's about CBD. May I have a show of hands? Any one of you who know what is CBD? I think Professor touched upon in your presentation. CBD, anyone heard about it? Is it like what? Central Business District? Is it correct? What is that? So anyone? Put up your hand. So you know about it. Do I have to explain it? So actually it's a chemical compound, which is one of the substances found in cannabis. In some jurisdictions, it may not be considered as dangerous drugs, but then I think if you are reading the newspaper, hearing from the news, it's quite broadly covered in the press recently, saying that Hong Kong government proposed to control CBD as dangerous drugs and ban CBD products on the basis that it may break down into THC. Okay, don't ask me what this is, but this is an element that when the CBD breaks down, is part of the dangerous drug element there. So such change means that who buy or consume the CBD products may face maximum 7 years in jail. But then there are also other organizations, researchers saying that, actually CBD did not appear to have abuse potential or cause harm in its pure. And there are also researchers supporting that CBD oils can be used for legit medical purposes. So there's two camps here, and Hong Kong government is towards complete ban. So any views here, Stephen? What do you think?
I'm not thinking. I'm sorry. Put it this way. Whether you can decriminalize or criminalize cannabis or cannabis substance, I think it's a matter for the society to discuss based on medical evidence. From a criminal law practitioner point of view, it's not for me to prove that the drugs is not dangerous drugs. It's the prosecution to prove that they say that substance my client has is dangerous drugs. So whether you need an amendment to the law or rely on the current law, I think the prosecution will have a good idea whether to press charge on the defendant using these is it CBD substance. As I said, I'm sorry, I don't have the answer.
Thank you. I think this is, as I said, this is a debate topic on its own. So I think maybe many of you are in the debate team. So here is some sort of ideas as to which side, and when you get into a debate competition or something, that you can get some tips about how to debate on the topic. As I said, this panel discussion is a short and sweet panel discussion. May we move into the next session?
Yeah, now it's time for the prize-giving quiz. So may we invite Joyce to ask you questions relating to the keynote sharing just now. If any of you know the answers, just raise your hands and we'll pass the microphones to you. If your answer is correct, you'll be awarded a pair of the Law Society brand teddy bears.
They are very cute.
Yeah, okay,
So
let's
get your
ask the
hands
quiz.
ready. Okay, the first question. Okay, it really, get your hands ready. It's really easy. Do we have the question on the screen? Okay. Please name the 3 macro factors that lead to drug subculture of young people.
Gentlemen,
Oh, the gentleman. He's the first one. The third row. Yeah.
first one is
Yeah. When you get the mic, please state your name and also your school.
Do I have to start with my name first? I can't. Sorry, I can't hear clearly. So, my name is Ivan, and the answer are as follows. Firstly, the economic factor, and secondly, culture, and last but not least, the risk society.
Wow. Congratulations. And then the pair of very cute Law Society teddy bears are yours. Okay, the next question is easy, right? Okay, the next one is also very easy. It's in Stephen's presentation, but also depending whether you really paid attention. Okay? The highest penalty of drug trafficking in Hong Kong. The highest penalty of drug trafficking in Hong Kong. Anyone? The lady in the 4th row. Again, please state your name and school before you answer the question.
I'm Martha from Singapore International School, and I think it is life penalty, life imprisonment.
And one more element about the fine. Do you remember?
Criminal record.
One more. There's a tips.
5 million.
Yes, 5 million Hong Kong dollars. Congratulations.
I hope you had a really good morning. Some pop quizzes and a lot of good information about drugs. So we're going to talk about current trends, drug-related crimes. We have with us an esteemed panel, and I'm very honored to be the moderator here. So we have Anthony Lo, Chief Inspector, Narcotics Bureau of the Hong Kong Police Force. We have Stephen Wong, barrister and former Privacy Commissioner of Hong Kong. We have Felix Ng, partner at Haldanes. And we also have Charlene Chan, social worker at Caritas Center and Community Service. So today, they're going to be sharing their insights into different aspects of the current drug crime trends. May I invite Anthony Lo to start off with the presentation?
Hello, everyone. As you all aware, there's a prize presentation, a prize quiz at the end of the presentation. Maybe you can just listen carefully about what I said and other guests said, because you may have the prize at the end of presentation. And excuse me, may I get the presenter? Yeah, just thank you. And first of all, I would like to talk about the drug types. And all of you may already know that from books or from your school life that there are various kinds of drugs. You may already know the appearances or the physical harms, but sometimes you may not come across about the street names of the drugs. So pay attention to the drugs, and you can see the videos. From the video, you will know about the drug types.
Cocaine is a powerfully addictive drug. They come in the form of an odorless, white, flaky, crystalline powder with a bitter taste that can be heated or smoked. Alternatively, they can come in a rock form referred to as crack. Extremely high doses of cocaine severely depresses the breathing centers of the brain, causing delirium, leading to rapid, irregular, and shallow breathing, convulsions, and unconsciousness, which could cause death. There have been reports of persons who died from doses as small as 30 milligrams. Other names for cocaine include blow, nose candy, bump, coke, C, crack, and or dust. Methamphetamine is a highly addictive drug. They are usually semi-transparent, colorless, grain-sized crystals with a bitter taste. Users typically smoke the drug in a bong or pipe. Long-term use of methamphetamine will lead to tolerance as well as physical and psychological dependence. Methamphetamine will also affect the nervous system, controlling the urinary bladder, sphincter system, leading to urinary tract dysfunction. At very high doses, toxic psychosis, convulsions, coma, brain hemorrhage, and death can occur. Street names for methamphetamine include speed, meth, crystal, ice, chalk, no-dose, and or wash. The drug confiscated was tested to be cannabis. Cannabis is an addictive drug that comes in the form of shredded or grounded leaves of graying brown and green. Alternatively, the substance also comes in a brown oil form. Cannabis can be smoked or infused into tea and foods. Solid foods containing cannabis are referred to as edibles. Cannabis abuse can lead to chronic and acute bronchitis and damage to the lungs. The drug also increases the risk of strokes and cancer. Other names for cannabis includes pot, grass, weed, marijuana, ganja, bud, head, and/or hash. Heroin is another powerfully addictive drug. They come in the form of a white or light gray powder, depending on its purity. Users typically inject, smoke, or snort the substance. Heroin, after injection, rapidly reaches the brain, thus giving an immediate effect. Because of its pain relief and happiness effect, heroin is one of the most addictive drugs of the narcotic analgesic type. If the body is not supplied with the drug, withdrawal symptoms occur within 8 to 12 hours of the last dose. These take the form of sweating, nervousness, inability to sleep, stomach and intestinal problems, plus severe pain and spasms in the limbs. Tolerance develops rapidly, and increasingly high doses are required to produce the same effect. A point is reached when no amount of extra drug will produce the desired effect. At this point, the user carries on taking heroin solely to prevent withdrawal symptoms. Heroin overdose can lead to death. Heroin is also referred to as dope, H, hose, hero, and/or brown. MDMA is a central nervous stimulant and also hallucinogenic drug. It is usually sold as a round tablet of various colors impressed with various sorts of logos. Abuse of MDMA can cause overexercise, which leads to dehydration, exhaustion, muscle breakdown, overheating of the body, and eventually convulsion or collapse insomnia, potentially causing sudden death from respiratory failure. Besides MDMA, names include ecstasy, molly, beans, X, E, and/or candy. Ketamine is a highly addictive drug. They are usually provided as a clear white liquid or off-white powder. Users typically snort the drug in powder form or mix the liquid form into drinks. Ketamine can cause hallucinations and feelings of invulnerability. Abusers may unknowingly injure themselves due to anesthetic and analgesic effects of the drug. It also lowers the heart rate, and so with larger doses can lead to oxygen starvation to the brain and muscles. Uterine damage and/or contraction is common for abusers of ketamine, sabotaging their normal life as they have to go to the washroom often. Some abusers can hardly make a 15-minute journey on vehicles. Overdose of ketamine can result in unconsciousness, sometimes even causing death. Alternative names for ketamine includes Special K, Kit Kat, Purple, and/or Vitamin K. These are the harmful effects to the physical body after consuming dangerous drugs. Drug harm is irreversible. Stay away from drugs.
And these are the common drugs abuse in Hong Kong. There are 6 types of drugs, and you may be aware that each type there's various form of appearances, and you may see there's some very nasty photos that all the physical harms over on the body, and when you abuse it, you will have the physical harm and also the mental harm. And talking about the figures, and actually the figures in the police arrest is somehow corroborate with Professor Zhang's finding, and there's an increasing trend for the youngster being arrested for drug offenses, and statistically, we categorize the offenses into serious one and the minor one. And for serious one, it's concerned about the trafficking of dangerous drugs and manufacturing of dangerous drugs. And you may see from the figures that actually is on an increasing trend, and especially for the persons under the age of 21, the number of people being arrested is getting on quite a high number. And last year, actually, there were 624 arrests of youngsters being arrested. Most of them actually commit of serious offense. Not meant they are abusing the drugs, but they indeed, most of them, like some of you, I mean, like they have some very well educated, and they were being recruited for drug trafficking, and some of them just get caught on the street and then possession of some cocaine or cannabis. So it's not very uncommon that the peer next to you, or when you encounter some new friends, they have the chance to get in touch with drugs. So speaking of which kind of drugs are being abused or being arrested for youngsters, you can see that cannabis is on the top of the chart. That most youngsters are being arrested for cannabis-related offenses, and some of them are just maybe possession of small amount of cannabis, and a number of them just take the cannabis for the purpose of trafficking or share to their friends, and that may fall trap to the trafficking in dangerous drugs. And you may be aware that why the cocaine is on the second on the chart, and because the traffickers, I mean the adults, the traffickers know that the drugs is very, very serious, and then the legal consequence is very heavy, and that's why they try or they tend to recruit the youth to take some high risk job. And if they can control some youngster for drug trafficking, then they can avoid the risk. Because imagine if you traffic like 10 grams of cocaine, you may already facing 3 to 7 years of imprisonment when you are convicted for the offenses. And now, any one of you have come across this online? Have you anyone see these things online, or maybe even you have some friends in possession of it? I believe not, and I hope not. But you can see there's a number of photos being shown on the screen. It's actually some cannabis-related stuff and gadgets. And as Professor Zheng said and mentioned, most of the youth just treat the cannabis as recreational drugs. I mean, youngster is quite popular, and you may see there are some pongs, wipes that are very trendy and then very colorful to attract the youngsters to use it and as a trendy sign for, wow, it's so chill. But actually, the cannabis is dangerous drugs in Hong Kong. No matter you have legalized in America or Canada, but in Hong Kong, cannabis is a drug. And there's many medical findings suggest that cannabis is indeed, you may have the many depression order and also cause respiratory disease. And the most important thing is cannabis. Some people, when you abuse it, you just treat it as gateway drugs. You will take a sip or take a smoke on it, but sometimes afterwards you find it's not powerful enough, and then you try and attempt to try other drugs. And now I would like to share a story, and because 1 month ago, I come across with a very elegant lady. She is a year 2 Hong Kong student, majoring in accounting finance. And the first time she encountered some cannabis is in a party. It's just a social party at the age of 18 years old with some alcohol, and someone will maybe just take the smoke, and suddenly just someone pop in show some cannabis in the party. And at that time, that girl is having very a lot of because she just engaged in some private business and lost some money, and that's why she was so depressed. And that's the time and some occasion that try some cannabis, and then she took a smoke, and somehow when she met this friend again and again, they share the cannabis. And after the party, when she left the party and go back home, and she just popped in some uniformed police officers, and that's why she was arrested for possession of dangerous drugs. And imagine that year 2 university student, she has a very good background. She can take the job as an accountant or maybe go to as a banker. But sometimes she is now facing a possible conviction. And as Mr. Hong said, that possession of dangerous drugs there's a presumption that when the drugs are found on your body, you are meant to be know the knowledge about the drugs, and you have to pay a very, very heavy cost to to hire a very good you have very difficult to acquit the case if you possess some simple possession of drugs. So most likely that girl will face a criminal conviction record that will ruin her life. And this is just one of the very fine example that I saw from my daily life and my work. There are many youngsters being tempted for cannabis temptation, and once you try the cannabis, you may have more chance to get, and you very difficult to quit the cannabis. And this the screen captures for some traffickers selling the cannabis online. And like as you imagine, you will very easily get notice about the Instagram or Telegram that selling cannabis is not the traditional, and I mean not like 10 years ago you make some phone calls or cold calls that you can order the cannabis. Nowadays, you can just browse through the Instagram or some social medias. You will not difficult to find some accounts that sell the cannabis, and so this is the real dialogue that the traffickers will send some advertisement in the Telegram, and that mention that for how many grams it costs how much. It's not an unaffordable price. Imagine that several grams of 7 grams of cannabis is not pricey. So I believe that most of you have some mobile phones. I mean, very very trendy mobile phone, but somehow the amount that you need to purchase the cannabis is not that expensive. So, and when you order the cannabis, the trafficker just deliver the cannabis to your home. Then you can just take it from the lobby, or you can just take it from the carpet, under the carpet outside your home. You can imagine that how the traffickers would like to boost their sales by using this kind of social media to let the cannabis to reach some of the youths. And speaking of some sentencing guideline, maybe some of you may already know about the sentencing guideline for drugs, and in particular for drug trafficking, the court has some guidelines for imposing the sentence for drug trafficking offenses. Take for example ice or cocaine, that amount to 10 grams of ice or 10 grams of cocaine, you are already facing a possible penalty of 3 to 7 years or 2 to 5 years. And that's the weight equivalent to a clip, a button, or something like a nail. That you can imagine for that small speck of drugs, you will already facing this kind of legal consequences. And at the last of my part, I'd like to share a real story that my commissioner has already mentioned to some of in this forum. It's about a case of a 15 years old girl. The case happened 5 years ago. She was 15 at that time, and she was very elegant, well dressed, and that some of you are also at the age of 15. She quit school, and she met some friends in some party, and then she was recruited for drug trafficking that shipped the cocaine from the mainland back to Hong Kong, and she has already sent the drugs for 4 or 5 occasions, and at the 5th occasion, she get caught for trafficking 20 kilograms of cocaine. And you can imagine that 20 kilograms of cocaine is at the top of the sentencing guideline. So she, at the end, was sentenced to 17.5 years of imprisonment. And this year, early this year, I went to the prison to interview her again, and you can see how her life spent in the remaining of 10 odd years, that she need to stay in the prison and did not have a chance to talk with her mother. And her mother's, the tiny wish of her mother, you cannot imagine that it's only take a photo with her girl. Imagine you can use your mobile phone to take a photo with your mom, with your friends, but her mother cannot witness how the little girl grow, and then cannot celebrate the birthday with her, and cannot have a dinner with her. That's a very sad story. So trafficking is really a very serious offenses, and you can see from the video that how the girl felt remorse about her wrongdoings.
販毒集團嗰啲人咧，就即係對比咗對於當時嚟講好高嘅一個價錢啊，人工我去大概就15000蚊。咁呢個金錢份量對於當時嘅我已經係好多，所以我就應承咗。嗰陣時我係15歲，佢哋知道我未成年，因為 喺即係做呢樣嘢之前，佢哋會叫我俾個身份證號碼佢哋啊，同埋住址證明，所以佢哋知道我未成年。當時始終因為覺得都係抱住一種僥倖嘅心態啦，覺得係冇咁容易衰嘅，同埋佢哋都同我講話你咁細個，同埋都唔係做好多次一兩次，唔會咁容易俾人拉到嘅，都抱住一種賺快錢嘅心態咯，同埋冇諗過事情原來係咁嚴重。當我知道咗嗰啲係毒品之後，我有同佢哋講過話，我希望即係唔希望再做啦。但係佢哋當刻就同我講話，你可以唔做嘅，但係你要揾人去接替你啦，接替你嘅工作咁樣，然後你先可以唔做。但係邊有咁容易揾個人去突然之間接替你啊？所以都係選擇咗繼續幫佢哋做落去。過咗一排之後，然後我就再同佢哋講話，我唔想做啦，因為始終覺得風險好大，同埋好驚，即係好驚會衰。但係佢哋嗰陣時就開始轉咗一種講法，就話你個身份證啊，我知道晒你屋企嗰啲資料啊。俾我感覺係覺得好似如果我唔繼續幫佢哋做落去，佢哋就會去騷擾我屋企人啊，同埋當刻我屋企人明唔知道我係做呢啲嘢，所以我嗰陣時都係繼續幫佢哋做落去。其實我最想同我媽媽講嘅就係，即係覺得好對佢唔住咯，入咗嚟係啊，即係做咗啲咁錯嘅事情入咗嚟，同埋喺呢段時間都陪唔到佢。係啊，即係或者啲好少嘅事啊，或者佢病啊，有時嚟探訪同我講，我都會好擔心佢。我記得我媽咪即係雖然煮嘅餸唔係話好華麗啊，佢煮屋企嗰啲發菜蠔豉煲好好食嘅，我嗰陣時好中意食嘅細個。我將來出獄之後，我希望第一件事就係好好咁返屋企，然後同即係屋企人食餐飯啦，食餐我媽咪煮嘅飯。因為以前覺得呢樣嘢係好必然嘅，想食一餐飯有幾難啫。但係到咗依家就覺得原來真係好懷念屋企人嗰陣時嗰種感覺咯，圍埋一齊。雖然得我同我媽咪，但係兩個人即係間房都唔係好大，但係兩個人圍埋一齊食飯，好溫馨嗰種感覺。但係入到嚟之後，覺得呢樣嘢其實好難咯。
As you may know, that is a real case and is from the real prison. Then I still remember that I was dealing with this case like 5 years ago, and then when I first talked to this girl when she was arrested, and my colleagues just bought him a meal, a McDonald's meal. And at that time, she just refused to. I'm not eating McDonald's. I would like to something better. But somehow, when I saw her in the prison again after the investigation, during the investigation, then she said to me, I was so regretted I did not take the McDonald's, because she know that she will have not chance to even eat the McDonald's for like 10 years or 70 years of life. So this is already almost, I watched this video for almost 100 times, but every time I watch it, I still feel very saddened for the traffickers to control some youngster for drug trafficking offense. And that drug trafficking did not only affect an individual, but indeed is affecting the whole family and whole society. So I'd like to know that my learned friend Stephen will follow some others sharing, and that's the end of part.
Yep. Thank you, Anthony.
Hello? All right. I'm very concerned about the time. Okay. Running out of time. Thank you, Mr. Wong. All right. I better rush through, some of the background materials, informations helpfully provided by Professor Cheung and Anthony. So you have all the background information about the dangerous drugs, the tariffs, the possible tariffs, sentences, and the consequences of being convicted. And that is a criminal record for the rest of your life. So you see the traps here, okay? This is indicative of traps. Now, this case is another real case that I happen to be the prosecutor. I prosecuted on this case. 2 charges, both are trafficking in dangerous drugs. One involving 31 packets. You see the packets of dangerous drugs shown by Anthony. It's like the weight of a paper clip, and that is exactly, the weight of the 35. The weight of 35. Oh, what happened? "31 packets, and the other charge related to 52 packets of cocaine. You know what it is now. 3 defendants jointly prosecuted or charged with the 2 charges. Jointly meaning they were alleged by the police that they have the joint enterprise in trafficking in the dangerous drugs. In other words, they worked together. They trafficked the drugs together. 3 defendants, 2 students aged 16 and 17 years, controlled by the adult. Venue near a hotel in Tsim Sha Tsui. Okay, on the street, 31 packets of dangerous drugs were seized on the person of the 16-year-old student. 52 packets were seized from the room, a hotel room, shared by all three defendants. Time, small hours till the afternoon of the following day, plus further investigations. How did they do it? The 3 defendants were friends. You see, the girl, Ayan, right, said, 大眼識人. Now, the 2 students didn't bring along their eyes when they met the adult defendant. They shared and stayed in a hotel room, okay, paid by the adults for purposes of trafficking, okay, dealing in, engaging in, dismantling and packaging, the drugs. The adult defendant received and made orders through the iPhones, the telephones, okay, and the student defendants delivered and sold dangerous drugs around the bars nearby in Tsim Sha Tsui. The reward, Ayan received 15,000 per deal. These 2 students received $50 per transaction. 50蚊, okay? Now about time, early in the morning, 2:37. This bloke, first defendant, alone, walking in the streets of Tsim Sha Tsui at 2:35 in the morning. He was inviting the police officers to stop, search, and arrest him, right? 2:37. So he was searched, he was stopped, searched, and found on his pockets 31 packets of cocaine. 斷正, red-handed, caught red-handed. On his body, packets of dangerous drugs and a hotel key card. This sweet 16-year-old student. Hotel key card. Then they found out he was staying in a hotel in Tsim Sha Tsui area. The police and many other colleagues, some of them from the Narcotics Bureau, I believe, they all went up to the hotel room the following morning at 11:04. Okay, you could see that somewhere at the back door, the staircase leading to the hotel, and somewhere at the door in the hotel, the front door. Okay, trying to use the hotel card to enter the room. No, the police officer didn't use the hotel card. Okay, they just knocked the door, and the door was answered by the adult defendant. Wow. Okay, you can imagine, just like Mission Impossible. Okay, you have a lot of scufflings, body contacts, and eventually all the remaining two defendants were pressed down on the bed. Okay, now that was the evidence, agreed. This is the hotel room. You could see a bed, a boy, the 17-year-old student, the adult, right? That's the controller, the trafficker, adult trafficker. Packets, 52 packets of dangerous drugs, cocaine, found later at the air conditioning. In the hotel room, you can always find these sort of air conditioning ventilation outlets. So you could see the 52 packets on the ventilation outlet of air conditioning system. So the police collected evidence, of course, from taking photographs, taking down all the packets of dangerous drugs from the ventilation vents, searching, the room, and of course, labeling, okay, and trying to seal up, all the evidence collected. Of course, the entire process of collecting evidence was challenged by the defense counsel, by the defendants. Arrest, investigation, you have the caution Mr. Stephen Hong told you about, the right of silence. I'm afraid, this right may be challenged by in fact, recently by a law reform report that perhaps under certain circumstances, you may not be expected to exercise the right of silence under certain circumstances. Okay, caution is one of the investigation procedures that the police will ask you to attend an interview, normally videotaped now, and the police officer will tell you, as if you watch the film, on television or in the cinema, you are not obliged to say anything. 你唔係事必要講 and so on, right? But what you will say will be recorded and perhaps maybe used as evidence in court. Under caution, the three defendants made a statement. And you have the video recording, all these criminal procedures. The 16-year-old defendant pleaded guilty. Why? Obvious reason, one of the obvious reasons was he was caught red-handed with 31 packets of dangerous drugs in his pocket. The other two defendants pleaded not guilty. Okay, and the statement under caution were ruled inadmissible. In other words, whatever the two defendants admitted guilt of trafficking in dangerous drugs. At the end of the day, the court ruled that these statements or admissions were made involuntarily. In other words, it's not out of their free will to make statements admitting their guilt. In other words, rule out. The court cannot consider this as an evidence to prove the guilt of the two defendants. So without this sort of evidence, the prosecution will have to prove, Mr. Hong said, beyond all reasonable doubt, that the two defendants committed the crime of trafficking. why ruled out the normal circumstances applicable, in this case was there was oppression, there was inducement. What sort of oppression? Okay, physical contact, inducement, in order to entice the defendants to make statements of admission of the guilt. They offer some sort of sweeteners, for example. One of the sweeteners was, you can go home if you admit immediately. Oppression, example of oppression includes, if you don't admit, I will tell your big brother that you named him. 你唔認咧，我話俾你大佬聽，你督佢。Now this is very serious because all these people, because they have a 大佬, because佢冇大眼識人, they were very, they fear that the 大佬 will, take further action against them. Young age, no serious consequences. 唔會咁啱嘅。阿欣 just told you. That was what she thought. 唔會咁啱係我嘅。All right, the doubts included, why didn't the police use the key card, the hotel key card found on the 16-year-old boy? But instead, they tried to break the door of the hotel. Therefore, the doubts remain on violence, body contact. Body contact, and when they collected evidence, the procedures of taking down all the evidence collected and the procedures were not accurate, were not comprehensive enough, did not follow the rules of the police. And what is most important was they couldn't find the electronic scales, 電子磅. In fact, next time, when you ask the police to go to find the garbage bin downstairs, they threw away the 電子磅, the electronic scale, to the garbage bin downstairs. So that piece of evidence was crucial, but was not found. And when asked, did the police officer notice the 52 packets of dangerous drugs on the ventilation outlets? The answers were no by the police officer. Why? The police officer said, because when we entered the room, we only look at the room in a clockwise direction, clockwise. 順時針方向. That's why we didn't notice it, because it was the other side of the room, the clock. Now that is a very strange answer given by the police officer. So the judge did not believe that the police officers were telling the truth. So witness demeanor, okay? Your 風度. You must exhibit or demonstrate that you are telling the truth. Common features amongst these two young defendants: school performance mediocre, 一般; family problems, single parent family; rebellious personality, like all of us when we were young; no social skills, okay? Taking refuge in a big brother, 靠大佬, all right? 唔帶眼識人. Fail to resist inducements, 吃喝玩樂, 包括 sex, 介紹女朋友俾佢食. No serious consequences, not me, 頭先講咗啦. Verdicts: the 16-year-old students guilty. First charge, 22 months as a starting point. Second charge, 23 months as a starting point. 5 months concurrent, 同期執行. 30 months immediate imprisonment. Adult, the defendant acquitted. The second young student acquitted. How unfair, right? Views to share with you, custodial sentences, including immediate imprisonment, 唔係緩啊，唔係緩刑，係 immediate 即時監禁 whether simple possession or trafficking. Criminal record after conviction for the rest of your life. Drug addiction crumbles willpower, judgment, being baited by or seeking refuge in criminals. And therefore, you have to resort to criminal acts, offenses. Don't be greedy for small favors, taking chances or trying the law by yourself. Okay? 唔好因啲小恩小惠. Now, these are for the police officers. If we want to have a fair trial. During collection of evidence, investigation, administering caution, obtaining caution statement, and giving evidence, be vigilant but avoid being mechanical. 要接地氣 and out of reality, common sense. Understand the adverse effect of agreeing to suggestions during cross-examination. If the defense counsel asks you to agree certain points that he is trying to put forward, and if you agree, yes, I agree. For example, many police officers agree. Could this investigation job be done better? Police officer said, yes, of course, it could have been done better. What are the consequences? The consequences was certainly this one was no good. This sort of investigation was no good. No overtaking or superfluous. No overkilling. Don't try to put on legs when you draw a snake. 唔好畫蛇添足. Be natural, employ the right demeanor, founding on the laws and the facts only. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. So we've just heard two real-life cases from the Narcotics Bureau and also barrister for the prosecution. Just really quickly before we move on to Felix and Charlene, I think Narcotics Bureau, Anthony, might have some comments as well.
Yes, maybe some of you have already learned these cases, and I also personally look in these cases before this forum. And this case was indeed handled by Yao Chim, District Crime Unit. And as my learned friend mentioned, and the admissible, the caution statement being ruled out in this case, they're rather crucial. But the judge just ruled out the evidence because he found that the police officers is not reliable witnesses based on the fact that he spot some discrepancy or some non-accountable explanation. But indeed, when the admission is being ruled out, most of the time because of the admission is the most crucial evidence. And in the absence of the caution statement, the judge will only rely on some circumstantial evidence. And in this case, actually, one of the fingerprints was found on the air conditioner vent next to the packet of drugs. And what the judge will do is normally to draw some irresistible inference based on the balance of probability to see which one is more credible. So in this case, the judge inclined for the defendant, and somehow is one of the very not very good story to tell that sometimes even you may find that someone is highly suspicious or highly responsible for drug offenses, sometimes because of the rule of law, to put the case in beyond reasonable doubt, they may acquit the case. But indeed, they are really highly suspicious for the crime, and then sometimes they will get rid of the consequences. But every time, police officers will try their best, because when you're doing the arrest, there's a lot of full surprise. You may not expect that someone is inside, but any time we'll plan for the worst case and they try to secure all evidence we have got. So that's the.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Now we'll have Felix to deliver his perspective as a defense lawyer as well.
Hello. First of all, I do not have any beautiful slides to show you, but I'm going to tell you some real stories relevant to you guys, international and local students. So far, we have heard so many horror stories. People going to jail for 20 years, trafficking, a lot of, heroin, ice. You may say, it's irrelevant to me, because I'm not going to do that. I'm not that stupid, okay? You may think so, but I'm telling you, there are a lot of clients, my teenage clients, they got into trouble because of very so-called small errors in terms of drugs, and they got into big trouble in life. I've been practicing criminal law for 20 years, so I have seen so many clients, including teenage clients, international school, local school, like you guys. I want to tell you, I do not want to see any one of you in my meeting room, in the law firm, or in the court hearing, because it's a very traumatic experience, I can tell you. When I see my clients, usually there are two scenarios. One, crying parents calling Felix and saying that, I'm so sorry, Felix, to bother you. My kid is in Western Police Station. Please rescue him. He's not out for bail. He's, staying overnight. So what do? So I need to go to the police station to deal with that. Second scenario, in a meeting room, usually after police station, but they will be going to court very soon. So the kid, usually on this occasion, pretend to be a little, happy sheep, accompanied by parents, because they know that they have some trouble. But the consequences, they need to go through the very traumatic court proceedings, all by himself or herself, with parental support. So I would like to tell us a few stories which will be relevant to you. The first one, I still vividly remember, is an international school student. He's Spanish. He got into trouble because one day, with his friends, they're smoking marijuana in Cyberport, openly. A group of friends, chilling, enjoying, listening to hip hop, fun, super fun, they think. Eventually, some passerby, of course, funny smell, and they're being unruly. So the passerby reported to the police. Then they got arrested by a big team of police officers, and most of them got red-handed and then detained at the police station, some overnight, because of, they're from different nationalities. So, there are some difficulties in arranging interpreter for the police interview. So the situation is, after all the police station procedures, they need to go to court. This gentleman that I represented, in a way, eventually he got lucky. His first offense, minor amount of cannabis. He got a fine, but there's a criminal record. So what happened afterwards? You may think, oh, he's okay, just a fine and criminal record, that's nothing. Eventually, when he applied to Australia, college, there are inquiries about his criminal record, because the immigration of the Australia, they require very detailed investigation or answers regarding the previous history. So he got some trouble, a lot of hiccups, and it's not a very pleasant experience. As far as I know, eventually, I think he didn't get it. I didn't follow up, but I know that he's still in Hong Kong. So you may also think that, maybe you will know, Australian Capital Territory, that is where Canberra is located, marijuana is legalized. What's the big deal? So why is the Australian government care? Why do they care about this? They do. So the moral of the story is that if you got this so-called small problem, you think a small record, if you go to study in the US, Australia, Singapore in particular, you will be subject to a very stringent background check. And you may not get a student visa or working visa. So that's my story number one. Number two that I remember is there's American Chinese guy, a bit older, 21 years old. He got into trouble, also cannabis. Because we heard from previous speakers, cannabis is one of the most popular among students. So he wasn't caught at the scene. So he was in a barbecue, with friends, also smoking. And thereafter, they went home, took a taxi. Oh, you think it's okay, right? No. There's roadblock in Repulse Bay. And then, I think because the police saw that there are a big group of young people, and then they act a bit suspiciously, they stopped them. And then, after opening the taxi door, the police smelled something funny. Then they stopped my client, searched him, and found cannabis, and also some grinders, and also a big pack of cannabis in herbal form. Eventually, he claimed that, I studied, he's American Chinese. So he claimed that I was brought up in California. California, it's nothing, no big deal. So what's the big deal, Felix? So why would I get into trouble? And then eventually, of course, I told him about the legal consequences and defended him in the court proceedings. One thing that I can tell you, even for the Hong Kong courts, they do not take into account too much about your background. Even if you're from a jurisdiction, say US, California, Arizona, Colorado, New York, is legalized, the judge will not give much allowance. I have a probation report of that gentleman. There's a particular paragraph saying that during the discussion with the social welfare officer, the defendant told the officer saying that, I'm so sorry about this, but I was brought up in California. It's like smoking cigarette. There's no big deal. Eventually, this line was particularly criticized by the judge, saying that this is Hong Kong. You have to respect the Hong Kong law. I'm sorry about that. There's no discount regarding what you say. And eventually, this gentleman was sentenced to probation order. Probation order, you may have heard, it's supervision order, basically. You'll be followed by a social welfare officer for usually 12 to 18 months. They will do random urine tests on you. They will talk to you. They will ask for an interview with you from time to time. So that's the consequence that he got. Because when he first approached me, he thought, it's just a small fine, I'll be okay. But I can tell you, it's not that simple. So that's the second case that I remember very vividly. And there are some other instances I can tell you. There's some very big misconceptions. We talked about social media earlier, right? Recently we have a client. He ordered basically from IG or from Amazon. That a few cases. There's something very cool or very trendy online that is called LSD, blotter paper. Blotter paper, in Chinese, they call it 毒郵票, like poisonous stamp. So LSD blotter paper is a very fancy piece of paper. There's LSD underneath it. If you lick it, you get high, okay? That's something cool, so-called. And the other thing is, have you heard of GBL? None of the speakers mentioned it, I think. GBL, GBH, it's something, what we call date rape drugs. It's odorless, colorless liquid. Usually, in some dodgy bars, some people will spike your drinks, put something like GBL, GBH into your drink, and get you intoxicated, and they can do whatever they want. Interestingly, some people do consume GBL themselves. I do not know why. If you do research on GBL, GBH, you would be very surprised. This drug is actually, technically, for industrial purposes, is used as a super glue remover. So it's interesting that kids drink, super glue remover for fun. It's basically rubbish. Why are you doing that? So these two kids that we dealt with, they order from IG, order from Amazon. They thought, big misconception, they thought that there would be no problem. They would prosecute the seller only, not the consumer. Eventually, the delivery was to them. Their controlled delivery, police disguised as delivery people, and then they arrested my two clients. Eventually, they were prosecuted, not for possession. It's for trafficking. You know why? Because of the import element. Because supposedly you are the importer of that LSD paper and also the GBL. So eventually they were charged of something more serious, which is trafficking. So do not think that trafficking is irrelevant to you. It could be very, very real, just from one click on IG or on Amazon. And the last story I would like to share is a Belgian guy, a Belgian student, Belgian Chinese. He's not a student, he graduated. He's 20-some years old. He got into trouble also because of cannabis. What he told me is that, in Belgium, cannabis also decriminalized. He told me, what's the big deal about it? I think the Hong Kong law is too outdated. It's too backward. I would like to know from all of you, any of you think that it's too backward, too outdated, that we should reform the cannabis law? Please raise your hands, because I think some people may say it's very stringent. Oh, oh, my son. So I don't want to see any one of you in court and in my law firm meeting room, including my two sons of 8 and 5 years old. So the law, if you think about international perspective, you may think that, oh, Hong Kong is too backward, why is cannabis being banned? But I can tell you something, apart from the jurisdiction that you heard before, Netherlands, Belgium, US, Canada, Australian Capital Territory, there are actually quite a number of first world countries whereby cannabis is also banned, including Germany, Norway, New Zealand. And of course, in Asia countries, we know very well, Singapore, Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Taiwan, these are the banned jurisdictions. So if you say that Hong Kong law is too backward, I would say, do some research and think about it. And also, there are some partial jurisdiction, I would say, that is, say, Spain and UK. What do I mean? Spain is decriminalized up to a certain amount, but if you smoke in public or you are caught for possession in public, you will get criminally prosecuted. And for the UK, you will get some sort of on-the-spot penalty ticket. So do not just readily assume that those so-called Western countries, liberal countries, they don't care about cannabis, they don't care about ketamine, they don't care about anything. Actually, I would tell you, a lot of the jurisdictions, they are as strict as Hong Kong. So I would say, no matter where you are, respect the law of that local jurisdiction. Although you may think, morally speaking, you may think, oh, I do not agree with the law, it's bad law. But you have the duty to respect the law in that jurisdiction when you are in there. So I think that sums up my insight dealing with different international students. And I hope that I won't see any of you.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you. So we've heard Felix talk about probation orders and other sentences in relation to drug crimes. We actually have with us Charlene, a social worker, who can give her insights on on her experiences dealing with such people.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Felix, for a very attractive and interesting stories. And I'm sure that I'm a social worker, and I work with youth like you, secondary, tertiary students who got arrested because of dangerous drugs, maybe possession or trafficking. And in my session, I would like to share with you what they share with me. So it's some of the insights from them rather than me. Yeah. Now, I would like to write on the topic of cannabis. I'm sure you all heard of cannabis. Some of your friends might even tried. It's not a, we have to talk about it, right? We cannot just let it be. And I'm sure many of your friends may talk about cannabis. It's a plant, it's natural, it's like cigarettes, right? Or even healthier than cigarettes. And there are many research saying that cannabis, they have their medical beneficials. So why? Why do we need to ban cannabis when it is such a good thing? And it helps us sleep, it helps us relax, it helps us think, it helps us create, especially music, especially drawings, innovations. I'm sure that, these are a lot of questions in many of our young people nowadays in Hong Kong. I would like to share I would like to also share what they talk about cannabis in another way. Many of them took cannabis for a few months, some took a few years, and some took it for like 10 years. Different stages, people with taking cannabis in different stages share with me with different insights. For those who just take cannabis in like recreational use, like parties, many rooftop parties, wild camp parties, and parties at homes that there may be cannabis. No, they won't feel addicted, right? I'm not addicted. I'm not a drug user. I'm not like taking drugs that like cocaine, ketamine. I'm different. I don't get addicted. I'm not a drug user. It's true. It's true that when you take it for the first instance, for the first few months, or even for the first year, you won't feel addicted because it's really relatively mild. But however, some of them share with me because of tolerance, they want to regain the highs, the good feelings, because surely it have good feelings, right? The highs or the calming effects. They want to regain the good feelings of cannabis. They have to take a little bit higher dosage. And when they took a higher dosage, they would take it more and more at the end. It's not a very expensive drug, as mentioned. The most expensive drug is cocaine. It's like 500, 600 for just a little bit. For cannabis, I don't know if you know how much is it. It's like 100 to 200 per gram. So it's affordable, right? It's affordable for a student, for an adult. And the dealers are very tricky. Not tricky. They have a business mindset. They will give you discounts. If you buy more, you will get more, like 200 per gram, but 1,000 for 7 grams. So it's easy for us, or for some of my friends even, they will take cannabis or some substance more and more at the end. So it's stages. At first, it's not addictive. You feel that it's not addictive, but at the end, I saw that many of them are using cannabis every day. They enjoy their life. They feel that they have more creative thoughts. But at the same time, they share with me that they start to have loss of memory. They forget things. They start to forget things. The calming effects of cannabis, when lifted, they start to feel hot-tempered, restless. They couldn't sleep without cannabis. Many of them told me that they use CBD or indica, if you heard of it, indica, a kind of cannabis, one type of cannabis, because they cannot sleep. You know, as a student, it's very high pressure in Hong Kong, so they cannot sleep. They use CBD or cannabis, but at the end, their insomnia get more serious because they rely on this substance. So cannabis is a plant, yes, but it's also a substance. Like coffee, I think some of you may have drank coffee. My friend drank coffee as well. At first, she drinks coffee once a day, but then now, after 10 years, she drinks coffee twice or 3 times a day. Because to keep her awake, she needs more caffeine. It's the same. Everything has its good and bad. I'm sure all kind of drugs, including ketamine, cocaine, cannabis, it has its good influence and feelings, or else no one would take it, right? If it's only the bad things happens, then I would not take it, of course. But it has its good feelings. So it's the things that they attract the people to use it. It helps people relax. It helps people to just put down their pressures. It helps them sleep. But what I want to say is, at the end, when you use it regularly, it makes you lose everything you wanted at first. So this is the first point, and it's very and other from the physical and mental consequence that just in the video of Anthony or in many advertisement, I'm not going to recap because not everyone will have those physical and mental consequences at the end. But I would like to share some stories of them that which really shocked me. Just now, speakers mentioned cannabis is a gateway drugs. Felix mentioned LSD. Yes, one of the youth that I worked with, he told me that when cannabis is not giving the highs that he expected, he tried LSD, the poisonous stems, which gave him more highs and which made made him very happy in that party. But then one time he was having a party in a rooftop. He walked near the edge of the roof unconsciously. He doesn't know about it, and he nearly jumped. But luckily, his friend, one of his friend is sober, caught him and prevent him jumping down the rooftop. He was so scared afterward because he don't want to die. He was not planning to do any suicidal attempt. But when he took LSD, he is just walking, actually. He doesn't know where he walks. He's just walking, and he wants the feeling of freedom. And he told me that he wants to be like a bird. So he wants to jump down and fly. So many of the drugs may distort our thoughts, and we may made ourselves situate in some life-threatening situation. And another situation that not really traumatized me, but it's about the date rape drugs. Other than GBL, actually cocaine, meth, which is ice, bento, they are also sexually arousing. Some parties, people may use cocaine or meth to have sex. And one girl who is 20 years old told me that under the influence of cocaine, she have unsafe sex with a man who she doesn't really know, and he got pregnant. She was very scared, very traumatized. She doesn't know how to tell her mom, and she don't know whether she should continue or terminate her pregnancy because she is just, she's not 20, she's just 16. She's still very young. So what I want to share is that these, of course, seems to be like extreme cases, right? This won't happen to me, but really now cannabis or some kinds of substance are very commonly found. And if you, a very fun fact, if you have noticed news yesterday, have anyone heard of the sleepy chicken? Sleepy chicken. It's a sleepy chicken challenge that was in TikTok. And it was in the news yesterday that people are inviting teenagers to cook the chicken with cough syrup. And which is, of course, obviously very harmful to the health. But I think we want to share, or we want to remind all of you that there are so many traps, and there are so many challenges now in Instagrams and in TikToks or in many social medias that we may want to try it. As young people, we want to try the challenge, but we have to think whether the challenge is really helpful to ourselves. And I think what at the last point I would like to share is that I'm not sure what are your feelings after watching Anthony's video about the 15 years old girl, Ayan. I was sitting here, I have tears. I feel very saddened as well. And I saw many of them are in this situation now in Hong Kong. So I'm sure you all are from very good school, and it's a blessing. But I hope that aside from yourself, please help your friends as well, because some of your friends might have fall into these traps. And I have one young people telling me that he was taking cannabis so regularly that because he's a student actually, so he just got part-time jobs. He spent all of his money to take cannabis. And what did he do? At the end, he sold cannabis to his friends. And then obviously he earned money, and then he started selling cannabis in Instagram and Telegram, just what you saw. And then at the end, he was trying to think of other unlawful way out. He wants to borrow his bank account to some, how say we say, some triads, to triads, to earn a few thousand. Actually, he can really earn a few thousand, but at the end, when he given his ID card and his name, he didn't get his money. He didn't. Yeah, I don't know why. Because triads, they often always tell you that I will give you 10,000, I will give you 5,000. But at the end, they don't give you that amount of money. They would give you a discount. Maybe they would just give you 2,000, and then they will tell you, I will give you the remaining 3,000 after the whole thing is done. But of course, they will not give you any more. So don't expect you can really get that money. And what this boy at the end, he was caught, other than possession of dangerous, he was also caught money laundering because he borrowed his bank account, which is a very, very, very severe crime as well. So I think, yeah, time is limited. So that's all for my sharings. And I hope, remember, everything has its good and bad, right? Good and bad. But just to think whether the goods are more than bad or bads are more than good, and you make your wise decision.
Right. Thank you very much, Charlene. At this juncture, I'm sure many of you have many questions. I know time is limited, but I do want to offer this opportunity for you to ask. So if I could just invite Professor Cheung also to join the panel. And thanks. And if you have any questions, please feel free to just raise your hand and we'll bring a mic over. Does anyone have burning questions? Yes. Oh, okay. I'm gonna, yep.
Sorry, before I ask my question, I want to ask, can I ask something about the things you talked about earlier, a few hours ago?
Yeah, sure.
So here's my question. So you mentioned that the reason behind the rise of crimes related to drugs for young people is because of the materialistic nature of young people, right? So basically, in the Generation Z, we ought to be much more materialistic than the older generations. So I want to ask, why does the number of drug crimes involving young people decrease in recent years, given the materialistic nature of us? Are there any factors other than the efforts paid by the police force?
I suppose the question is directed to me. Okay. Now, young people getting more and more materialistic and individualistic. This is observation we can see throughout the last 20, 30 years. That doesn't mean that it always brings the crime rate upward and so on. There are times that even though you're materialistic, but still some social situations might prevent you from getting into large high rate of crime. Now you mentioned the police. The police has been doing very good. Now don't forget the Narcotics Division of the Security Bureau, which is also assisted by a advisory body, ACAN, Action Committee Against Narcotics. Now, since the ketamine thing happened since 2000, and then 10 years later, the Narcotics Division was able to find out a way to do prevention, treatment, and all that. And a lot more efforts have been made to really help to prevent drug abuse and also to treat and rehabilitate drug abusers. So these efforts must be credited along with the police efforts, so that we saw a decline in the number of drug abusers under age 21, shown in the CRDA in that data set. So I think it's because the government, the NGOs, and a lot of professionals have been doing a good job, very hardworkingly, so that the crime or drug abuse among young people actually, as reported by CRDA, has been declining. But then in the last 2 years, although the absolute number declined, but then the proportion of young drug abusers doing cannabis has been on the rise, and that's the thing which causes concern. I don't know if I answer your question.
Right, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the floor? Yes, at the far end. Yeah. Yep. So the last row, and then later on we'll have the fourth row from the back, and then the third row from the front.
Hello, my name is Laura. I'm a Form 5 student from Fook King Secondary School. I want to ask, what do you think of the recent opening of a CBD experience store in Hong Kong selling items like candy and beer that containing CBD? It makes CBD easily accessible to ordinary people. Is it a threat to Hong Kong drug control? What can you or government do about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. For CBD things that we have discussed early on, then the government indeed is intend to legislate the CBD as a dangerous drugs according to the law. And right now, the government will impose or gazette the CBD as a scheduled substance under dangerous drugs. And I expect that by early next year, CBD will be one of the dangerous drugs. So that means if you possess of any CBD products, be it CBD cream or cookies or candy, that you may be liable for possession of dangerous drugs. And I'm not rather touch on the background or some legislation rationale behind this, but as a police officer, if I encounter any person in possession of CBD products, and I will arrest him or her. So you will face the same legal consequence of other drugs like ketamine, cannabis, or cocaine. That's why that's the question, and that's my answer to your question. And I would like to also further to supplement Professor Cheung's answer to the previous questions that actually the CRD figures had some limitations, that we only observe the trend, that we observe that there's an increasing trend in cannabis abuse and cocaine abuse. The limitation for the CRDA figure is that it's a voluntary basis, mainly on the voluntary reporting by those NGOs or so. But what I observe, or what other authority observe, is the drug abuse problem tends to go underground. Then many of the figures that I saw, most of the people was first reported for drug abuse, they have a drug history of 5 or 4 years. That means that the problem is indeed hidden in many places in the society, and right now there's lots of methodology to see the real situation in the drug situation in Hong Kong. Then some countries may even adopt some wastewater research that will tell you the real story of the drug situation in the society. So don't even be complacent for the downward numbers of the reporting abuses, but indeed it's going up, especially amongst the youth, and in particularly the cannabis.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've been told that we only have 2 minutes left. I know there are still some questions, so maybe at the end, some of us will stay behind to answer some. But I think you all want to have your pop quiz as well, right? Yes? Okay, so how about this? We'll do the pop quiz, and then maybe if the speakers are available, we'll stay behind a little bit here, and you can come and ask us some questions. Okay, so for the pop quiz, once again, we have 2 pop quiz questions. They will have prizes upon answering correctly.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheung, Mr. Stephen Wong, Mr. Felix Ng, Mr. Anthony Lo, and Ms. Charlene Chan, and Hin Han. So yes, it's time for our pop quiz. The same rules apply. 2 questions will be asked, and if you do know the question, and if you do know the answer, Please raise your hand and a microphone will be passed to you. If your answer is correct, this time you'll be awarded a pair of Law Society branded courtroom hammer USB. So, are you ready? Let's start.
All right, okay. We're gonna start off with a pretty easy question, okay? So listen carefully. Can teenagers go to jail if they're convicted for, whoa. Okay, I did not see who was the fastest. Can I? Okay, let's, yeah, oh, you saw, okay, great. Okay, so yeah, can teenagers go to jail if they are convicted of drug-related crimes? Yes, okay, we have the correct answer. Congratulations. All right. Okay, this one is a little bit more difficult, but I have decided to modify the question slightly. Originally, the question was, what are all the street names of cannabis? But I'm just gonna ask for 2 street names of cannabis, okay? Well, so let's all put our hands down for a quick second, and on a count of 3, please raise your hand, okay? 1, 2, 3. Oh, third row. Okay, yeah.
Marijuana and weed. Yeah, cannabis. So 2 street names for it are marijuana and weed.
Marijuana and weed. All right, yep, correct. Congratulations.
President Chen, Commissioner Seal, Mr. Stephen Hong, Professor Zhang, Mr. Stephen Wong, Mr. Felix Ng, Mr. Anthony Low, Ms. Charlene Chen, and our young people in the audience. I'm humbly honored to host this meaningful event. I hope all of you enjoy today's forum, which is a public event officially accredited by the government as a celebratory event of the 25th anniversary of the Hong Kong SAR, and separately by the Law Society of Hong Kong to mark its 115th anniversary. Today, we are honored to have the presence of many distinguished speakers. But our collective focus is our youth in the audience, and this is my personal message to you. I hope that when you leave today's event, not only have you gained a greater understanding of drug abuse and its repercussions, but when you return to your school, you can act as an ambassador against drug abuse and share your knowledge with your peers and friends. Being young brings many joys in life, but acting in ignorance or arrogance can lead to life-regretting consequences. Earlier this morning, President Chen has kindly reminded in his speech, drug trafficking has very serious legal consequences. In 2021, a youth aged 16 at the time of committing the offense was sentenced to imprisonment of 8 years and 7 months for drug trafficking of drugs railing approximately the weight of a smartphone. Allow me to share with you a quote from Albert Einstein, which I feel is very fitting for today's theme. The only thing more dangerous than ignorance is arrogance. In closing, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all those who contributed to today's successful forum, including our distinguished speakers, members of the Community Relations Committee, and members of the Subcommittee on Abide by the Law Education of the Law Society of Hong Kong. Our moderators and MCs, special thanks to the Faculty of Law of the University of Hong Kong for kindly arranging the complimentary use of today's venue. Thank you.